Yeah. What's going on, guys? We're
We're live.
welcome to we're finally live. We've had some issues in trying to get organized for our second live stream. So there was an event scheduled for one. We're talking, trying to figure out, okay, we got to make sure that we can stream it to this channel or that channel. But the reality is it's another lesson that is always good to kind of learn is that sometimes things are beyond your control. And the only thing that you can do is make the changes to move forward, right? So you can't worry about what was, but we have to make the changes to
Absolutely.
move forward.
Yeah. And the running joke is as James has known as we've got to know each other, my nickname was Johnny EMP for electromagnetic pulse from one of my old business partners. Because if it was electronic related and I touched it, somehow it just didn't work.
Yeah.
So I like to say for all you technical people, I'm a good prospect for tech support. Anyway. So
Oh
anyway.
man. So
So James,
so
how are you? How are you,
I,
my
I
friend?
I am doing very well, man. What about yourself?
Good. Somebody said the other day, I heard this funny line. It was a funny line. It was a reminder of an old friend of the family used to say this. He said, if I was any better, I'd be twins.
Well, I don't
It's
know if I'd be
cheesy.
twins, but um
Yeah.
things are going really good. It's been a great week so far. Just continuing to work on new programs, new content, whether it's for the Engineer Your Success podcast or also working on a private podcast for one of my small business clients to help to reinforce the company culture there. So it's a lot of great, exciting things going on in my world.
What are you finding as one of the are you seeing a number of different topics pop up as you're trying to work with people that you find yourself talking about a lot? Is it one or two overarching themes that you keep running into?
I think I would say that the major overarching theme is communication and people really trying to grasp the art of effective communication. And I say the art because although you can look at these prescriptive techniques as how you can best communicate, you have to be able to package your information in a way that the receiver can actually do something with it. And so the way
Mhm.
that I teach communication, it puts a lot of the onus on the person that's delivering the communication
Right.
because that's the only person that you can actually control, right? If you're the one that's delivering the message, you cannot control the other person, but you can control what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, that's so true. I do a men's Bible study on Thursday mornings, and there was a guy there that was he's called the groups pastor at the
Hmm.
church, and he happened to be the first person one of the first people my wife and I met when we visited this church as we were looking at moving to this area. Just a genuinely just great demeanor. You know, when you meet somebody and it's just a comfortable connection, like at hello,
Hmm.
and he's studying. He's going for his master's in theology right now. And the funny part is, we found out in one of our first conversations to show you how communication can just flow sometimes.
Hmm.
We both worked for Enterprise at
Oh
one
wow.
point. His wife worked at Enterprise. He lived in Illinois, right down the street from actually where, and he worked used to right down the street from where he used to live at one point.
Hmm.
A lot of similarities there. And I brought up a point to him today that he has the ability, just a natural ability, to take content. We were going. This was again, it was a Bible study, so it was going over some stuff, discern what it means, and communicate that in such a simple way that everyone can understand and
Hmm.
relate to it in a non-threatening, aggressive or know-it-all way, like some people do at some of these
Yeah.
Bible studies. Any place, there's. I always love when somebody says, "Well, Jesus meant this." I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay, this is a good one." I love when somebody starts to speak as God. That's
Well,
always a fun thing.
essentially, many people, although we don't think of it that way, that is how we communicate. We communicate as if what we have to say is the only option or is the only choice. And that
Yeah.
runs into a lot of issues because, one of the things that, I believe is true, the Bible teaches it, and other things will mention it, is that what you think is what you say, right? So if you are saying things in a way in which you believe that your word is the only option or your answer is the only option, then you're thinking that way. And when you have that kind of closed off thinking, that really hinders your ability to be curious. It hinders your ability to connect with other people. It hinders your ability to effectively communicate, to effectively manage, and to effectively lead.
Well, yeah, you know, we have two of these and one of these. I mean, I say this all the time.
Hmm.
And I think if anyone's ever been married or in any sort of relationship, personal or professional, we
Yeah.
all would be better off asking a question than making statements.
Yes.
You know, and as I probably have shared on this, I've shared a number of times growing up. My family had a phrase: we have very strong-willed, never quiet type of family members, where we say, you know, ask us a question, you're going to get an essay. And you know, we have opinions and we're often wrong. We're just rarely ever in doubt. And
I think
so
that one's true. We are often wrong, but very rarely in doubt. I like
yeah.
that.
Well, and it's something I have had to grow past and continue to try
Mm,
to get better at, because also I'm the youngest of my family, and with very outspoken siblings and parents and whatnot. And by nature I'm the people pleaser, right?
yeah.
That's kind of by my nature. And I will avoid conflict on for myself. Now, if something there's a physical or verbal conflict of someone I care about, I'm right in there
Yeah. Yeah.
because I have a protectionary nature to me.
Hmm.
However, getting my point across, it was even with I was just back home in Chicago this last weekend. It was my dad's 81st birthday, my niece's 29th
Oh,
birthday, and they
cool.
happened to be on the same time, so we always celebrate them together. So I drove into Chicago for that, and it was great to sit there. But it is funny when you get the family together and the dynamics. You see how that all
Hmm.
works, how certain people just speak over, and I'm like, I just want to. Never mind. The same dynamics, like you just kind of like, okay, doesn't matter at this age, or if I was 19 or where I am now. It's always interesting, and yet if we don't think that impacts us as leaders, as co-workers, as vendors, as it impacts everything we have to do. And I think part of the reason we're having this, is to lead better, to live better, is because it starts with ourselves.
Hmm.
We need to learn to lead ourselves better, and we have to be willing to seek out advice and feedback, not just confirmations.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of times when we ask for something, it's like, I think a lot of times people are just asking for confirmation of what they thought was right.
Hmm.
And yet if you disagree with that, the initial reaction is defensiveness, and you start to close yourself off. And now you get into a justification mode versus a listening and learning mode. And
Hmm.
that's where relationships can be impacted, your own personal growth can be impacted. And you do that enough times, it takes a lot to build. That also starts to erode trust.
Hmm.
And I think if we all could get better at listening more, because if you're listening, you're learning. If you're speaking, you're not. And people don't care what you know until they know that you care, right?
Yeah. That's true.
So I think that's something that we kind of want to keep looking at and always thinking about.
This is true. This is true.
So if you were to say, all right, in 2024, we're in a unique season in the United States. We're in a political session.
Hmm.
It's I think we could both eagerly say it's a fairly nasty narrative going on out
Yeah.
there right now.
Hmm.
Not a lot of kumbaya, huggy stuff going on, if you to say the least.
Hmm.
Um, what advice would you give people to, if you are responsible for leading others, to lead well and lead better in 2024? What do you think would be some of the one or two themes people really need to focus on, knowing what's coming at us from the outside? Nice, easy question for you to think about.
No, I mean, that is a great question. I think it's leading with empathy
Hmm.
and being able to have that connection with the people that you lead. Because if I mean, you may not agree with a particular, thought process as someone that you lead, but you have to lead them. And many times we may find ourselves trying to manage the situation versus leading the people.
Mhm.
And part of leading the people is leading with empathy, leading with that connection and understanding who they are and recognizing that they have a right to their opinion. They have a right to think the way that they think. It's not something that's detrimental to the company. It's not against the values of the organization. It's none of those things, but they think differently than you. And I think in a world where we talk about acceptance and being able to allow these other points of view, it's understanding that with empathy, you can lead and allow that person to believe how they want to believe, as long as it's not impacting how you guys do business. That's when you have to, I think that's where you have to look at other tools to step in and intervene.
And I totally agree with that. I guess a follow-up question is, do you think in our hypersensitive narrative and we're beyond political correctness anymore? Um, I think, do you think that we've gone maybe too far of trying to be either A, too open, or B, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I think in one respect, tell me if you agree with this. Maybe this is a better way to do it.
Okay.
I think some people today are so afraid of negatively impacting or hurting someone's feeling or rubbing them the wrong way and are walking on such eggshells that we're not standing strong in what our beliefs, our values, our strengths are, because we're trying to cater to so many other feelings and opinions that we actually lose our sense of identity as a company, as an individual, as a leader sometimes. What are your thoughts on that?
The first thing that comes to mind, John, is do you have a vision? Do you have core values for your organization? And have you taken the time to make sure that those values aren't simply the things that were written down 20 years ago or
Hmm.
15 years ago? Do you still actually live out those values? Because values have to be more than just words on the paper. They have to come to life in how you lead your
Yeah.
company and how you run your company. And it becomes part of the culture of what you do. So when I hear, are we standing on our values? Are you living your values as a company,
Mhm.
as an organization? If you're not, maybe it's time to go look at those values to make sure you have the right values in place. And so I know that doesn't directly answer your question, but that's the first thing, kind of focusing on, are your values aligned? Are you living your values? Because if you're living your values, then it is not misalignment for you to say something that aligns with those values. Right.
It,
So go ahead.
okay. Go ahead.
No, no, no.
So, all right. So I get that, and I agree with all of that. Yet, I think there are times, and you walk the talk. I mean, let's kind of, are you walking your talk,
Yeah.
right? And I do like the point you made about we have to go back and look at the values. Values are like foundations of a building,
Hmm.
foundations of your business, and there shouldn't be 100 of them.
Right.
Okay. Um, the other thing I think many leaders, and I'll know myself, when you're working for someone, they are imposed and communicated to you, sometimes well, sometimes not
Hmm.
communicated to you well. And then, yes, you're looking at, does your manners, it's kind of the do as I say, not as I do kind of a thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I grew up in the world, it's like, listen, your actions are speaking so loud, I can't hear what you're telling me right now.
Yeah.
And that can be good or bad. Now, if you're not doing a good job, one of the things I do when I talk to companies and when I interview the entire team, I love those opportunities, and
Hmm.
it is always eye opening for the principals and the senior leadership when I ask them their okay. Here's a series of questions. For example, one very simple one: are you competitive?
Yeah.
You know, what makes you competitive?
Hmm.
These are general questions. Now, I'll ask that of everybody. I'll ask that of a janitor.
Yeah.
Because everyone will, first of all, if you ask a question, people are inclined to typically give you an answer, but it's really telling to see how they view these different things. I usually have 3 to 5 different questions I ask them, and then take those summaries and say, here's what you said, here's what your team said. Where's the gap, right? Where's the communication gap in there?
Yep. Yep.
And it starts from the top down, right? On So we're talking about values. Are you living them out in your personal life and your professional life?
Yes.
Because we talked, I think, a little bit last time about how we tend to compartmentalize different parts of our life, our personal life, our spiritual life, our business life, our, whatever, our health, whatever. But in today's world where so many things are public and bleeding into one another, it's almost impossible to totally compartmentalize yourself in a healthy way. I think some have maybe gone too far. They're just so public about everything. There's certain things you just got to keep to yourself. That's a whole a topic for another talk.
Yeah.
I don't need to know, what it's your cat's birthday. I don't know. Maybe. And I just ticked off everybody that owns a cat. I understand that,
No,
but I
you're
don't need to
good.
know those people. So it's getting harder to lead because there is a heightened sense of sensitivity. And there's a phrase I heard the other day. It's there's you say you have to watch out for learned helplessness.
Hmm.
Okay. And this learned helplessness, it's basically something isn't working in your life because something of someone else did to me.
Yeah.
Versus instead I'm thinking, okay, instead of maybe thinking everything happened to you, maybe it happened for you.
Yeah.
And I think of we can both go back of a time when, yeah, I had those partners in the real estate company embezzled. I mean, obviously far more than I had to my name and all. Yet it was one of the greatest things that happened for me to reestablish, reformulate, and really focus in on what do I value? Were my actions and my words aligned?
Yeah.
And the reality is they were to a degree, but it doesn't take much to get you off track.
Yep.
You
No,
know,
I would I do want to chime in on one of the things that you said, and I totally disagree with you that it's getting more difficult to lead. I don't believe that. I
okay.
believe that it may be difficult for people to lead if they are stuck in their way of leading, if they're stuck in their way of thinking. But if you're curious and you are continuing to evolve as a leader, I don't think it's getting more difficult to lead in general. Yes, you have Gen Z, you have millennials, you have different generations that are there. You have to adapt.
Now, again, it's to a degree. I agree and I disagree. Here's why.
Yeah.
It's not just the generational piece and the ideological pieces that we're dealing with. I feel we're in a time, I think of some HR directors and organizations I've spoken with and talked to, and the level of compliance guidelines, the level of training, the level of is just so much higher today. Now, some of that is a good thing. I'm not saying it's all
Mhm,
bad. Some of that is because we needed to grow and evolve and communicate differently.
mhm.
Absolutely. And a top-down form of leadership structure that isn't collaborative doesn't really work very well in today's world. Yet I think we have seen a pendulum a little bit going maybe too far where leaders are afraid to lead sometimes. Maybe this is kind of where we're getting to it.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so because I go back to you manage things and processes and systems, but you lead people. So those things that you're talking about, there are absolutely administrative burdens. There are absolutely regulatory requirements. There are things that leaders have to deal with, and that they have to manage. And so, but I look at that as a management issue, not a leadership issue.
yeah, and so I
I am the one that's making that line and how I think
sure.
and how I work with my clients.
Yeah, and it's different when we're sitting here as consultants coming in.
Hmm.
We have a different freedom,
Hmm.
I think, sometimes to say things in a way, and there's a reason they bring us in because sometimes you want to get a different point across. You have
Hmm.
to get a different voice in the room.
Hmm.
It's kind of like I've got to get Uncle James to come and say the same things to my kids that I've been telling for 10
Yeah.
years. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
you hear Uncle James? I'm like, I've been telling you that for 10 years,
Yep.
and all of a sudden
Yep.
Uncle James
Yep.
is a genius, right?
Yep.
Whatever, as long as the kids get it, right? So I I really do think though, and I will, that's a fairly generalized comment. There is a greater level of, I don't think there's as much respect. I don't see it being modeled as much from some of the younger generation to say our generation and older, similar to what we had for people that had come before us. I think there's
So are you
less
talking
person.
in general or in terms of leadership positions or,
Well,
just
it comes in where I'm saying where for people coming in, listen,
Mhm.
we graduate, we were fortunate. We went to university, we graduated, get our degree. I mean, I remember I got my degree. I'm ready to be vice president of whoever's going to hire me because I know, right?
Absolutely.
I know everything. I've just gone through classes kind of.
Yeah.
Um, you know?
Absolutely. We're ready to go. Absolutely.
Yeah, and now you just add the access between phones and everything else that we have out there today. We have access to information at such a high level and in seconds. And there's been this misnomer that with more knowledge, we're wise,
Yeah.
and we're really not. And so with that, you add that to the people coming up where I don't think there's been as much bad leadership as what you'll hear about out there. I think most people are just trying to figure it out, trying to do their best. And yes, they're learning and growing. Because they're, like when I got promoted, I remember one time I had a president of enterprise that would kind of mentor over me, and really great guy. He'd always take me to lunch after I got a new promotion. And I remember one of the last ones I had before I left the company was, I said, "All right, let's go to lunch." I said, "Okay, all right, Bob, let's go." And so he says, "All right, now you haven't earned that title, right?" I'm like, "Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
All right, Bob." I said, "I'll bite. Go ahead." Says, "You've earned the right to grow into it like the other ones. We'll see if you do. You're the same knucklehead you were yesterday before you had that card." So it's those little humble things that he would kind of, but it was true. He says, "You had the right to grow into it. We'll see if you
Yeah.
do." That was a more professional way of talking about the Peter principle, right?
Yeah.
So my point is, I believe, and I see this with my nieces and my nephews, great kids, but they're not motivated similarly like we are. So as a leader, we have to adapt and learn to find out and actually ask more questions to find out what it is that they are more motivated by. What is their why, so to
Yeah.
speak? And then try to make sure that is in alignment with our core values and the goals of the company. And if they're not, leaders have to do a better job of, moving on for both parties' sake.
Yeah.
Again, another conversation. On the flip side, there is a greater level of, I don't think hubris is the right word. I don't know what the right word is, honestly. Um, Not necessarily just a lack of respect, but there's a greater sense of that they know more, and we're less knowledgeable, we're less wise because of our age, because of our. Well, you guys don't get it. It's different now, and there's far more. I see far more vocal opposition to leadership from the youth coming into the workforce than what maybe I saw being modeled coming in at my stage. There you go. I just laid it out for you. Let's see what you think on that.
I don't disagree that the the there are different generational views to hierarchy
Mhm.
and how we treat hierarchy. Um, the when I was growing up, the way my parents kind of viewed the world was if someone is your manager, you do exactly what they say, no question asked. They're the leader, you fall in line, you kind of keep moving forward down that line. As I've progressed through my career, I think there have been situations where I've thought very similarly to the younger folks that you're talking about, like, little respect for the leader. But the one thing I've learned over the years is that respect is earned and not given. And whereas the older generations before, respect was a given, now you have to earn respect. And you earn respect by how you treat people, how you lead people, and how you manage things.
But
So I can
shouldn't respect though be at least in the beginning with no prior relationship, enter into a conversation with grace and respect for the other person,
I think
with the
in
assumption that they have earned their position for a reason.
well, see, there's two different things that you just talked about. One is
Yeah,
grace and respect for the other person, which is irregardless of position. So that means grace and respect is coming from both sides of that discussion, right? And then if you're talking about the position, then I think that is where age and generational views kind of come into play. So I can recall being in a situation where you're working for an organization, has a manager who did not really know how to effectively delegate. But what they would do is every time something would come across their desk, they would shoot it to myself and one of my colleagues. We would do the work. When the work came back, this person was the one taking all the credit and talking about all of the different things that they do.
that's
No, no, no.
different. That's different. That's different though.
It's not necessarily different. because he did not treat us with respect. Although we were respecting him from his position, he wasn't treating us with the technical respect that we deserved, and eventually came back to bite him. So this thing can go both ways. But in general, what I will say is that if you are a manager and you come in with the disposition that the people that you are leading should respect you because of your position, don't stop there, because there's another level of respect that is earned through how you treat them and how you lead.
There's no question about that. And in your example, that's bad leadership
Yes.
in incarnate, right? I mean, that's just bad leadership. That's
Mhm.
like taking credit. That's an ego-driven decision.
Yes.
And as we've said, your ego is not your amigo, as my coach Terry Levine always says. Your ego is not your amigo.
Yeah.
And listen, we've all had some degree of that. And my ego, that's, I think, the advantage as we get older. I was talking to a doctor friend and he goes, yeah, that's what he says. As we get older, we get humbled because your testosterone goes down and start losing your hair. You're not, I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know where you're going with this, buddy, but it's kind of true. Now, my point though is my expectation when I am now a direct report or people above me, my expectation is that they have knowledge and wisdom and experience I don't have.
Mhm.
And I'm going to go and learn from them.
Yes.
They can disqualify themselves through their actions and their words.
Mhm.
Okay. But I didn't step into it saying, hey, I'm really good. You need to listen to me. I've got
Mhm.
great ideas. I listened to them. That's where the mutual respect piece comes from. Because let's face it, they don't know my whole story and I don't know their whole story.
Yes.
Coming into that. And think of how many times that I remember I had a manager one time he was a peer, became a manager. He handled some things poorly, and then I had I had an ego, and so I didn't hold back. I let him know what I'm thinking.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Now I did have enough sense where I said, you and I need to have a talk. I didn't do it in front of everybody else, and
Yeah.
let's have we're going to have a chat, right? And to his credit, he sat there and listened to it. I learned something, even though I really wasn't going into that to learn. I want to be heard, not to listen in that moment. But I did hear something. Now skip ahead a couple years later, when I had been in that position and then beyond, and I
Mhm.
talked to the then promoted to another city. And we were talking. We recalled that situation, that
Yeah.
conversation. It was a conversation in the car, right, one on
Mhm.
one. Let's get out of the office. We're going to have a chat. That was less. That was 20 something, John. I had to give him some credit for not only how he handled that, but also at that stage a couple years later, having led for a couple years and having to deal with a lot of other stuff, I didn't know what I didn't know. I
Yeah.
didn't know that what he was doing was actually right, because in the moment, everything I knew to that point, I thought he was making a dumb decision.
Yeah.
I come to realize his indecision was a decision for a reason.
Yeah.
And the way he handled it, I looked at later, I used as a learning experience of how to handle things. But in the moment, I didn't know it. Now, if I feel I know everything, and if I have a weak leader, and if you have team members that have strong personalities and are
Mhm.
very outspoken, you have to discern between what is an outspoken person doesn't mean it's a confident person. Frequently, that's the opposite.
Mhm.
Someone's very insecure.
Yeah.
And the more statements you make than offensiveness, that's where people skills training, and you can't just rely on your company if you're an employee, and if you went from being an employee to now becoming a small business owner, starting to grow this thing
That's
out.
different. Yeah.
If you've never led leaders,
Yeah.
you've only led more, I don't know, let's say more sales or administrative stuff, but you haven't led and developed leaders. That's a whole nother level. You need to seek that out. That's where you need to bring people in to help you that have been there.
Yeah.
Because you are where you are, whatever it is, the five people you spend the most time with.
Mhm.
But I think John Maxwell said it, or somebody said, where um, the people you associate with, the books you read, and the things you listen to will determine your outlook on the world
Yeah.
and how you communicate to everybody. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to chime in about the definitely the people that you have closest to you make an impact, the people that you're learning from. But in terms of this whole dynamic between manager and the leading the team, it's the assumption that all of the young folks are one way and all of the older folks are another way, we tend to paint things to fit our own narrative, and it's not that clean. It's not that clean. It's not every manager is not great. Every manager is not horrible. And every young person doesn't necessarily want to be the VP today. Um,
Could it be if one of the things we talk about here in our company and we try to get out to other people is try to go into a situation catching people doing things right.
yes. Yeah.
If
No,
we
I
can
think that's right.
wire,
Yeah.
yeah,
You see what you look for. You find what you're looking for. So if you're
yep.
focused on looking at the those right things, that's what you will see. I mean, from an individual client perspective, if those of you that are dealing with a whole bunch of negativity or stuff that's happening in your life, what I would say is start trying to find the sliver of things that you can be grateful for. And the
Hmm.
more things that you can find to be grateful for, the more
Hmm.
grateful things that you'll see. And your situation, your actual circumstance may not change, but how you view that circumstance is what may change. And your view determines the actions that
Yeah.
you take and the steps that you take moving forward.
And and when you're this gets in, this is where the bleed over between your personal life and professional life
Mhm.
absolutely happened. Have you ever known somebody that in their personal life is one way, in the professional life you see them,
Yes.
they're like, "Who are you?"
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, and I think there's times, we've talked about that, out of work, John thing that, my Cynthia used to have to say to me. Yet, if we think our personal lives don't bleed over and don't impact, we're lying to ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's where it is critical. And one of the things I can say has been critical to my success, my ability to communicate and connect with people from all over the world, from every race, creed, color, background, socioeconomic level, is the fact that I have been, first of all, I've interacted with people from all those different backgrounds.
Mhm.
I've had leaders from different backgrounds and different belief structures and different things.
Mhm.
Um, and I have found and continually fine tune my hence new path towards where I want to go. That's where this company came from. And I think that as a sign my grandfather used to have in his office was too soon old, too late schmott, you know? So, and it's so true.
Yeah.
And I look at my father when I was with him this weekend and finding myself at, I just turned 50 this last year. So, yes, I've admitted it. I've been calling it my second 49th birthday for ever since I officially hit 50. And my dad just turned 81.
Okay.
And it's fascinating watching him, how he communicates now versus when I was in my 20s versus in my teenage years or my
Yeah.
single digit years, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and my wife's like, I've never seen that from your dad. Well, this is Jack 2.0. Now,
Yeah.
he was a great dad and a great leader, but yet the wisdom, and I think part of the wisdom is how little he speaks now
Mhm.
and how many more questions he asks and the patience he has for the answers and doesn't, patience to listen to them. And it doesn't even necessarily give answers. A lot of times it's a question with a question. It's like,
Yeah.
I haven't seen this. And I can think about it. You might want to think about this. Have you ever thought about X?
Mhm.
It's the, one of the things that Terry Levine does is that she says, when you're talking in front of people, instead of going, what you really should look at is, have you thought about this? This simple gesture of hand outstretched versus, hey, here's a point I want to make versus, you might want to think about this.
Mhm.
Just the body language of what that communicates
Yeah.
is dramatically different. So
So
I think, go ahead.
no, some say John. So have you thought about how
Hmm.
the advice that you would give to the manager that's in the situation where he's leading younger members on their team, and there does seem to be this difference in the respect quotient or respect issue?
Hmm. Oh yeah. There's a lot of things you can do. The first thing you need to make sure is you are crystal clear with what the goals and expectations and values are for yourself and for your company if you own it, or if you're leading it, managing it, you know what the company objectives are, you know what the goals and values in which this is what you are being judged by and what you need to communicate, right?
Hmm.
And by the way, I think sometimes people will stay with companies because of the perks, the benefits of the paycheck, but they're not really aligned and they don't believe what the company stands for.
Yeah.
You find me a manager that's living in this duality or a leader in this duality, I will tell you they will be having problems and there's going to be stress in a lot of areas of their life.
Yep.
That's all. Okay. So if you assuming you have that in place and you're clear, if you ever aren't sure if you're communicating well, ask other people.
Hmm.
Sit in front of your people and get feedback. Now, when I say that, I think of a time when we had built a lot of things up. I did a lot of change in a short period of time, restructured, and again, this is one of my earlier leadership positions,
Hmm.
and I pushed and I hardened because my advice was get it turned around, teach them to do it like you did. Well, I know the intention behind that advice was good, but it was probably and I followed it to the T. I tried
Hmm.
to make them just like John, which the problem was some of them did that, but that isn't good. It's like kind of like I don't want to marry myself.
Yeah.
That would just be conflict. So I created results, but a lot of conflict. And I had somebody who was older than me, he was like 9 or 10 years older than me. We're still friends today. And he
Hmm.
said, "Hey, Bubba, um, you got a issue on your hands." And what are you talking about? He says, "Yeah, you're getting stuff going, but there's a lot of people talking.
Yeah.
I suggest you sit down and get it out in front." So I sat down after a Monday morning meeting, shared, "Hey, we've made a lot of changes, blah, blah, blah. But I also understand there's some things that I may have pushed hard on. There's some feedback. This is your chance. I want to get honest feedback from you. What is working well? What's not working well? What
Hmm.
can we do differently? What is there something that I'm handling that, that there's collective that I am here to learn and listen." And I sat there for an hour and a half. I
Hmm.
started with the one person who I knew always talked bad behind me about my back, behind my back. I started with him because it couldn't get any worse. And of
Yeah.
course, he chimed in a few more times.
Yeah.
But here's what was fascinating. I would listen to him and say, "Okay, all right, excellent. Anything else?" And I took notes. By the way, if you're ever going to get feedback, by the way, leadership tip, write it down in front of them because A, you're going to forget it, but it also shows you actually care enough to write it down. And
Yeah.
then when he went around the whole room, it took an hour. It was fascinating to watch how it shifted, James. It
Yeah.
totally shifted to by the time I was done, people were like defending me. Well, yeah, but no, you haven't had to sit here. And I didn't say anything. I said, you know what? And they were expecting me to defend, to justify, to explain, which never goes over well.
Yeah.
And
Two
that was
things
not the
that,
point.
that kind
Yeah,
of
go ahead.
stand out to me. You went through the process of earning their respect.
Hmm.
The whole process that you talked about, because people want to be heard, they want to be valued. And when you went through the process of listening to them, you showed them that. You could, what would it look like if you started out that way? You never
Hmm.
know. Like you don't know. But in terms of leadership tips moving forward, you definitely, as you said, want to write it down in front of them so they can see that you are present and that you are engaged. You don't want to be looking at your phone. You don't want to seem like you're distracted. You want to be
Yeah.
100% engaged and there in the room with your people. And you do want to be curious as to, hey, what are your thoughts? What do you think about this? You want to be open for people to actually speak their mind. And you have to create that environment where people are psychologically safe, where
Hmm.
they feel safe, where they can speak their mind and not that they speak their mind, there's going to be some kind of retribution. So I think you did a great job of
Yeah.
engaging your team.
Well, it was also, and it was advice that someone gave me that I didn't come up with on my own. It's someone
Mm,
that I luckily trusted enough in his advice, and he was a little bit older than me, been around the block a little bit. Yes, I had respect as a salesman, but I was a new manager,
yeah.
right? And and I was hiring, and eventually got to the point, kind of like a new team. Eventually, I had fired some people, I had to hire some new people, and at that point, it's kind of like, okay, hey, coach, you inherited this team. Okay, like Jim Harbaugh just left the the Wolverines,
Yeah.
and he's going over to the Chargers now. Well, obviously, he's got a great team.
Yeah.
Most people take over a struggling program. They'll give you a year or two till you're getting your team, your crew, your systems in there. You don't usually have that kind of time frame in a job. You're supposed to
No.
figure that out. The other part to this, though, for the success wasn't just that one meeting. it is important then you actually have to implement. You have to follow up on it. And they have to see that it wasn't just a one-off thing.
Yep.
Okay, he sat there and just took it all in, never defended. That gained a level of respect. The other part was I had to then prioritize what was actually most important and then act on what I felt was most important. And I got some feedback from couple key players that I had in that group that I trusted that we had a very open dialogue. Title didn't matter at that point, right? And they gave me honest feedback, and the guy that brought it up. The challenge I think sometimes people feel is either A, they're afraid to get the information because they might look bad. They might look like they don't know the answer to it. And the reality is we don't know a lot of answers as leaders. We have a few features. It's kind of like you make a decision, then you go make it right.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not right or wrong when you make it. The actions and how you pivot and adjust along the way. The other part is what I like what you had to say is people need to feel they need to be heard. And I also have come to learn over the years, some people that want to be heard, if given the opportunity to do something about it, they don't want to do anything about it. They just want to be heard.
No, yeah. That's a whole nother discussion, right? That's a whole nother discussion. And they don't want to do anything about it. And then the other one is that particularly in the context, it can happen at work as well, where people don't necessarily just want to be heard, they want to be obeyed, meaning that it's not enough for them to state what their thoughts are. They want you to do exactly what they say to do, how they say to do it. And if you don't, and this is where that communication comes into play, you as a manager communicating to people why you didn't do a certain thing or why you are doing a certain thing, because what they'll say is that you're not listening, you didn't hear me. And you have to be able to say, I am listening, I did hear you, here's what you said, here's the decision that we made, here's why we made that decision. Doesn't discount what you said, but there were some other factors that we had to take into consideration in making this decision.
And that is the part where I feel when I say it's gotten a little more complex, is people are as we are getting more and more feedback, and people have more and more opinions on how things need to be done, especially with limited experience behind it.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to be strong in your convictions. There's that delicate balance between listening, pivoting. But if you let your entire team sway your direction and your decision day to day, man, because ultimately most people are not natural leaders, are not leaders. And most people will not become in leadership positions. There's a reason 5 or 10% of the world employ the other 95. Now, it doesn't mean that these people can't be great leaders. Either they're not given the opportunity, or if they do, they don't fit and they don't grow, because you and I have invested many, 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 many thousands of dollars into learning from people that have been where we are and beyond. And so, because there's always a better way to ask a question, there's always a better way to answer something, a better way to, be proactive or not react.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes, what is it worth? I mean, I've had a meeting I paid somebody $2,500 for a 2-hour meeting.
Yeah.
And I've got a takeaway from that literally changed the trajectory of some of the way I do some of the things I do. It was an amazing investment, but most people think $2,500 for 2 hours. Now, I know people that have paid far more than that per hour, right? In fact, people pay me more than that per hour when you look at the actual time we may engage, but they're not paying me on an hourly basis. They're not paying you. They're paying us on the millions of, let's say the $1 million that we've invested in ourselves in all the years and all the decades to come, to give you a 1-sentence, 2-sentence answer that comes from decades of experience behind it, to save you yes, you can go out. You want your own experience? Go for it. It's painful, expensive, and slow, but it is your choice.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. So we hit on a lot of topics. We could go a lot further on, but I think we'll kind of table this one.
Yeah. I mean, it was good. Thank you as always, John. I appreciate you making time for us to have these discussions. For those of you that are here connected with us on the live stream, we appreciate you coming through. If you think of any topics that you want to hear, topics that you want John and I to kind of chop it up about, write it in the comments. We'll be able to see those comments and we can incorporate that into what we're going to be doing in the future. John, you got any parting words for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if people, if if you see this in social media, where there's post a comment down below, put it in, and share with us what were the things that was a good takeaway that you heard James say or I say. That would be really helpful for us. And if there is a current situation you're dealing with, and you could use maybe a little bit of insight on it from ourselves, or something in the past, maybe how would you have dealt with this differently? That can help you, because listen, I'm always learning. Ooh, that would have been a better way to handle that in the past,
Yeah.
or hey, I'm dealing with this right now. What do you have to say? Our goal here is to help people lead better. And ultimately, if they do, they will live better.
Yep.
And so that's why we're doing this. We're taking our time to share this with you. And the more specific we can be to a question or an answer or a solution that you can have, that's what we want. And if we don't have it, guess what? We have a pretty big network and we can find the solution to it as
Yep.
well. Not
That's
just two
true.
talking heads here. We have very large networks and a large reach where we can help a lot of people get you connected with where you want. Because if people do that, we create that type of communal relationship here, even though it's virtual. We can go offline and help you some other ways too. We'd love to do it.
You got it. Well, we're going to make that the drop the mic moment. So, John, I appreciate you again. Everybody, I appreciate you chiming in, and we will see you next.